Could a 4-day working week be the future? It's a question that's been posed many times. Well, now 86% of companies who actually took part in a 4-day week trial said they would continue with it going forward. They claim that productivity not only stayed the same, but in some cases improved.
So let's find out if this is a good idea. We're delighted to be joined now by Ryle, director of the 4-day week campaign. Morning, Joe. So this was your survey, this was your investigation. You were always going to find this was a good idea, weren't you, Joe, if that's what you wanted it to conclude?
Well, that's what we were hoping for. We've been inspired by trials that have already taken place across the world since the COVID pandemic, where once workers moved to a 4-day reduced hour working week, productivity went up and so did well-being. So we're hoping to test that in a much bigger scale in the UK. And this pilot is the biggest ever pilot of a 4-day week in the world so far. I will caveat that it is only interim results. It's just a midway point survey. The companies still have a couple of months to go. But what the evidence does show is very encouraging. Well-being going up, productivity going up, and most of these, vast majority of these companies planning to either make it permanent or continue the trial beyond November.
So just to explain to people how this might work for an average company. How do you accommodate a workforce that only wants to work 4 days a week?
So the model which we advocate for is a 4-day, 32-hour working week with no loss of pay for workers. That may not apply overnight to every single industry. There would have to be a transition to get there. But we've got to recognise that the 9 to 5 5-day working week is a very outdated way of working now. We need to bring work into the future. We think the 4-day week is the future of work. And this 9 to 5 5-day working week model is causing immense burnout, stress, overwork, mental health issues. And ultimately, if we want to live happier and more fulfilled lives, then we should be thinking about moving to a 4-day week.
Yeah, can I just ask, so in this trial, so there were more than 70 organisations, including some like a local fish and chip shop, 2 larger companies as well, like tech companies. So it was a wide range of people, of companies taking part. But how would you sell it to people who say, well, if I open for more days? So just explain to us how it would work, because in terms of workforce, I'm trying to figure it out in my head. Do you need to employ more people? I mean, surely the costs don't necessarily add up, or do they? Correct me if I'm wrong.
There's certainly some sectors where it is much easier to implement, and you could just implement it overnight on that basis. There are other sectors where it is going to be more tricky, and it might be that moving immediately to a 4-day working week might not be quite right. Maybe there'll be a shorter working week. But we've seen many different sectors taking part in this pilot, and many different examples in those sectors too. So construction industry, engineering, retail, hospitality, manufacturing, fish and chip shop, as you say. And so they are showing that it is possible. That the fish and chip shops, for example, have been more creative. Their rota patterns to ensure the coverage over a 5-day week, but that staff aren't working more than 4 days. And I just spoke to the owner of that fish and chip shop yesterday, and he said it's going very well for them too. So positive so far, hoping that that maintains over 6 months. And I think at that point, we really want to see the government taking this more seriously. If we're going to implement a 4-day week for everyone, and we think it should be implemented on that basis, this is about a better work-life balance for everyone, then we do need to have government involvement in that, working with industry and business, working with trade unions.
So just to be clear, when you say a 4-day working week, we're not talking about working for 5 days, but one of them from home, which is what people might think we're discussing here. It's not about getting less pay because you're only working 4 days, not 5, let's say typically. It's literally about compressing your productivity into 4 days rather than 5 and getting the same take-home pay. Is that right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it's about reducing hours by 20% and hoping, aiming to achieve about the same amount of productivity. And in the evidence that's come out so far at this midway point, nearly every company has at least been able to maintain productivity, so getting the same amount of work done in the 4 days rather than 5. For others, actually, productivity has improved. Profits have gone up, workers are being more effective with their time, and that's not surprising. If we're burnt out and stressed and overworked, we're not going to do a very, very good job. We're also not going to be very, very motivated. So by having that, in many cases, 3-day weekend for rest, for catching up in other aspects of our lives, we then come back into work on a Monday morning much better rested, much more motivated, and that's where the productivity gains come from.
Joe, it's so funny because I imagine this is very much a generational conversation because even I am listening to you. I'm not that much older than you, I flatter myself, but isn't this just a load of millennials that want to have a bit more time off and go have a hangover for 3 days a week rather than 2?
I mean, I think there is a generational shift taking place. I think that for my generation, the generation below me, I think, we don't want our lives to be defined by work in the same way that it has been the case for our parents and grandparents' generation. And we've got to remember, it's been 100 years since we moved from a 6-day week to a 5-day week. And this 9 to 5-day working week model was designed for an agricultural, industrial economy. We've come a long way from that. And we think work should change too. Working patterns should change too. We haven't actually reduced working hours for decades in this country. So think about all the greater productivity since the 80s and 90s. We're all on our smartphones now. That's gone towards more profits for companies, not more free time for workers.